São Paulo, Brazil, March 2006. A humid evening in a small Liberdade dojo. In 47 minutes, Anderson Silva will face a challenge that could destroy his UFC dreams before they begin. But right now, he's just shadowboxing under flickering neon lights, unaware that his biggest fight won't be in an octagon or be on this sweat-stained mat against a man the world will never remember. Anderson wasn't supposed to be here tonight. He should be home in Curitiba with Dayan and the kids, preparing for his UFC debut in 2 months against Chris Lieben. Instead, he's in São Paulo because of a phone call that came 3 days ago. "Anderson, you need to come to the city," said his old friend Ricardo Laborio, voice tight with worry. "There's a situation, the kind that could destroy everything you've built." The problem had a name. Rodrigo Nascimento. Anderson wasn't supposed to be here tonight. He was supposed to be home in Curitiba with Dayan and their kids, supposed to be preparing for his UFC debut in 2 months against Chris Lieben. Instead, he's in São Paulo because of a phone call that came 3 days ago. "Anderson, you need to come to the city," said his old friend Ricardo Laborio. Ricardo's voice was tight, worried. "There's a situation." "What kind of situation?" "The kind that could destroy everything you've built." Ricardo Laborio wasn't just any friend. He was one of Brazil's most respected Brazilian jiu-jitsu masters, black belt under Carlos Gracie Jr., a man who'd trained champions, who understood the politics of Brazilian martial arts better than almost anyone. When Ricardo said there was a problem, Anderson listened. The problem had a name. Rodrigo Nascimento. Nascimento was 28 years old, 6'4", 220 pounds of pure aggression, VALE TUDO veteran with a record of 23-2. More importantly, he was loud, charismatic, and building a following by claiming that Anderson Silva was a fraud. This Anderson Silva, Nascimento had been telling anyone who would listen. He fights cans in Japan, small guys, washed-up fighters. He comes to UFC and faces real Americans, real competition. He'll fold like paper. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what happened on Brazilian television 2 weeks ago. Nascimento had appeared on Luta Livre, Brazil's biggest MMA show, sitting across from host Carlos Montenegro, wearing a sharp black suit, that cocky smile plastered on his face. "Anderson Silva represents everything wrong with Brazilian MMA," Nascimento said to the camera. "We send our best fighters to Japan to fight circus matches. Meanwhile, real fighters like me stay here, fighting real fights against real competition." Montenegro leaned forward, but Anderson's record speaks for itself. Undefeated in his last 8 fights. Nascimento laughed. "Against who? Has-beens and never-weres. Look at his opponent in Pride, Yushin Okami. A decision victory. Barely won. Ryo Chonin submitted Anderson with a heel hook. Where's the dominance everyone talks about?" The studio audience murmured. Some nodded. Nascimento was gaining momentum. "I'll tell you what," he continued, leaning back in his chair. "Anderson Silva is afraid to fight real Brazilian fighters. Afraid we'll expose him before he makes his American money. He hides behind his manager, his contracts, his pretty technique videos." Then he said the words that changed everything. "Anderson Silva, if you're watching this, I challenge you publicly. No contracts, no commissions, no politics. Just you, me, and whoever's better. Unless you're too scared to face a real Brazilian." The challenge aired on national television. Within hours, it was on every MMA website, every forum. Brazilian fighters started choosing sides. Some defended Anderson. Others wondered if Nascimento had a point. But Anderson said nothing publicly. No response, no acknowledgement, complete silence. Which made him look exactly like what Nascimento claimed he was. Scared Ricardo called Anderson the next day. "You have to respond. This is getting out of hand." "I don't need to respond to everyone who wants attention," Anderson said, but his voice lacked conviction. "This isn't some random challenger. Nascimento's connected. He's got backing from some powerful people in Rio. People who don't like that you're representing Brazil in the UFC." Anderson knew what Ricardo meant. Brazilian MMA politics were complicated. Territorial, tribal. Pride Japan was one thing. Exotic, distant, easy to dismiss. But the UFC was different. The UFC was American, mainstream, potentially massive money. Some people in Brazilian MMA thought Anderson hadn't paid his dues domestically before getting his shot. Nascimento was giving voice to that resentment. "What do you want me to do?" Anderson asked. "Meet with him. Settle this quietly. Show him you're not afraid. Make him back down. And if he doesn't back down," long pause, "then you have a problem." That's how Anderson found himself in São Paulo on this humid March evening. Ricardo had arranged a private meeting. Just Anderson, Nascimento, and a few witnesses from both sides. No cameras, no publicity. Handle it like men. The dojo belonged to Master Euclides Tatu Hatim, a legendary figure in Brazilian martial arts. Tatu was 67 years old, had trained fighters for 5 decades, commanded respect from everyone. His presence meant this meeting would be conducted with honor. Anderson arrived first. He'd driven from Curitiba that afternoon, 3 hours through São Paulo traffic, mind racing the entire time. Part of him was angry. Why should he have to justify himself to anyone? He'd worked his entire life to get to this point. But another part, the part he tried to ignore, wondered if Nascimento was right. Had he been avoiding tough Brazilian competition? Had he taken the easier path to get his UFC shot? At 8 p.m., Nascimento walked through the door. Anderson had seen him on TV, but in person, Rodrigo Nascimento was imposing. Thick shoulders, tree-trunk legs, hands like hammers. He wore jeans and a white t-shirt that strained against his chest. Short black hair, small dark eyes that never stopped moving. Calculating. Behind him came 3 other men. Anderson recognized one, Paulo Cesar Lima, a veteran VALE Tudo fighter. The other 2 were younger, clearly Nascimento's training partners. Nascimento's eyes found Anderson immediately. Smiled, that same cocky smile from television. Anderson Silva, he said in Portuguese, voice carrying across the small door. The Japanese sensation comes home. Anderson didn't respond, just watched, measured the man's movement, his posture, his energy. Master Tatu stepped between them. Gentlemen, you're in my dojo. We settle disputes with respect here. Explain your positions. Find resolution. Nascimento gestured toward Anderson. I already explained my position on television. This man has been avoiding Brazilian fighters, building a reputation against weak competition. Now he wants to represent Brazil in the UFC, without proving himself at home. Toto looked at Anderson. Your response? Anderson considered his words carefully. I fight who my management puts in front of me. I've never avoided anyone. If Rodrigo wants to fight me, his management can call mine. We'll negotiate terms. Nascimento laughed. Management, contracts, lawyers. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Real fighters don't hide behind paperwork. Real fighters don't call out opponents on television for publicity. The room tension spiked. Nascimento's training partners shifted closer. Ricardo moved next to Anderson. Publicity. Nascimento's voice rose. You think I need publicity from you? I've been fighting real competition while you've been dancing in Japan. I've earned everything I have. As have you. Nascimento stepped closer. Prove it. Master Tatu raised his hand. Enough. This isn't a street corner. You want to fight. There are proper ways. But Nascimento wasn't done. Master Tatu, with respect, this isn't about proper ways. This is about truth. This man claims to be Brazil's best middleweight. I say he's never proven it against Brazilian competition. He turned back to Anderson. Here's my final offer. Right now, no gloves, no rules, no time limits. Just grappling. First to submit or tap out. Let's see what your Japanese training is worth against Brazilian heart. The challenge hung in the air like smoke. Everyone understood what was happening. This had moved beyond words, beyond politics. This was about respect. About proving who you really were, when everything was stripped away. Anderson felt his heart rate spike, not from fear, from excitement. The part of him that had always lived for these moments. For the pure test of skill, against skill, was awakening. But his rational mind intervened. His UFC debut was 2 months away. One injury here could derail everything he'd worked for. His family depended on his success. The smart play was to walk away. Think about it, he said quietly to nothing. We both have careers, futures, families. This doesn't need to happen. Nascimento's eyes lit up. To him, Anderson's reasonableness sounded like weakness. There it is, he said to the room. The great Anderson Silva, looking for a way out. This is what I've been telling everyone. No heart, all technique, no warrior spirit. Something shifted in Anderson's chest. A heat building, controlled but growing. I'm trying to be smart, Anderson said. Smart is what weak fighters say when they're scared. Ricardo stepped forward. Rodrigo, that's enough. But Nascimento was feeling his power now. He had Anderson on the defensive. Made him look reluctant in front of witnesses. Time to finish it. You know what, Anderson? Don't worry about it. I understand. You've got your pretty UFC contract to protect. Your image. Can't risk fighting a real Brazilian and getting exposed. You know what, Anderson? Don't worry about it. I understand. You've got your pretty UFC contract to protect. Your image. Can't risk fighting a real Brazilian and getting exposed. He started walking toward the door, then turned back with theatrical timing. Just remember, when you're in America getting your ass kicked by real fighters, we all know the truth. You were too scared to prove yourself at home first. That's when Anderson Silva made the decision that changed everything. Stop. His voice cut through the room like a blade. Nascimento froze at the door. Anderson stood up slowly, unwrapping his hands as he spoke. No gloves, no rules, no time limits. His voice was calm, but something cold had entered it. Grappling only, first to submit or tap out. The room went silent. Master Tatu studied Anderson's face, saw something there that made him nod slightly. 5 minutes to prepare, Tatu announced. I'll referee. Nascimento's confident expression flickered for just a moment. He'd been so focused on goading Anderson into the challenge, he hadn't fully considered what came next. Anderson Silva wasn't just some pretty technical fighter. He was a legitimate Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt under the Nogueira brothers. On the ground, he was dangerous. But Nascimento was bigger, stronger, and had been training specifically for ground combat his entire career. Plus, he had something Anderson didn't. Nothing to lose. 5 minutes, he agreed. The PRIPARETO and Anderson walked to the corner where Ricardo waited with a towel and water. Are you sure about this? Ricardo asked quietly. No, Anderson answered honestly. But I can't let him say I'm scared. Not publicly. Not in front of Master Tatu. Your UFC debut won't happen if everyone thinks I'm a coward. Anderson looked across the mat where Nascimento was stretching with his team. Besides, look at him. He's strong, but he's tight, muscled up. On the ground, flexibility beats strength. Ricardo nodded, but his expression remained worried. He's not just strong, Anderson. He's hungry. He has nothing to lose and everything to gain. Anderson considered this. It was true. For Nascimento, beating Anderson Silva would be career-defining. For Anderson, it was just risk. But that wasn't entirely accurate either. Anderson thought about the television interview, about the doubt Nascimento had planted in people's minds, about the questions that would follow him to America if he didn't settle this now. Sometimes, a man had to fight not because he wanted to, but because not fighting would cost him something essential. Rodrigo, Master Tatu called out. Are you ready? Nascimento stood up, rolling his shoulders. Ready, Master. Anderson. Anderson removed his shirt, handed it to Ricardo. His torso was lean, defined, not an ounce of excess. Next to Nascimento's thick build, he looked almost fragile. Ready. The two men walked to the center of the mat. Master Tatu positioned himself where he could see everything. Gentlemen, this is grappling only. No strikes, submission or verbal tap ends the match. No time limit. He looked at both men. This stays in this room. Understood. Both nodded. Touch gloves and begin when I say. They faced each other. Anderson extended his gloves. Nascimento looked at them for a moment, then grudgingly touched them. Begin. Nascimento immediately shot for a takedown, driving Anderson toward the wall. But Anderson sprawled, spun behind Nascimento as they fell to the mat. The first minutes were chess, each man testing reactions, looking for openings. Nascimento was strong, explosive. Anderson was fluid, using timing where Nascimento used force. They rolled across the mat. Neither could establish sustained control. Nascimento would gain position. Anderson would sweep. Anderson would threaten submissions. Nascimento would power out. 5 minutes in, Nascimento was getting frustrated. His strength advantage wasn't translating to dominance. Anderson kept slipping out of positions where he should have been finished. That frustration led to the mistake. Anderson was waiting for Nascimento, went for an ambitious armbar, committing fully but telegraphing the attempt. Anderson rolled with the movement, came up on top, immediately starting his own submission game. Now Anderson was on top, and his top game was surgical. He passed Nascimento's guard, methodically half guard, side control, mount. Each transition put more pressure on his opponent. 8 minutes in, Anderson moved to north-south position. Working for a Kimura, he isolated Nascimento's left arm, applying leverage gradually. Nascimento resisted with pure strength, his face reddening with effort. But strength has limits. Technique, properly applied, does not. 10 minutes in, Anderson had the Kimura locked deep. Nascimento's arm was bent at an angle that couldn't be sustained. Everyone could see it, but Nascimento wouldn't tap. Better to have his arm broken than admit Anderson Silva was better. Anderson felt the resistance, understood what was happening. He could finish this one more twist, and the shoulder would separate. Instead, he did something unexpected. He loosened the submission slightly, removing immediate danger, but not allowing escape. Rodrigo, Anderson said quietly, "You've proven your heart. I respect that. But this is over. Don't make me hurt you." Nascimento's eyes were squeezed shut from pain, but he heard Anderson's tone, not victory or dominance, but genuine concern. For a moment, something passed between them, an understanding, man to man, fighter to fighter. "Tap," Nascimento whispered. The FTRMATH Anderson immediately released the hold and helped Nascimento to his feet. "You're tough," Anderson said. "Tougher than I expected. You could have broken it. I didn't want to break it." The animosity was gone, replaced by warrior's respect. "I was wrong," Nascimento said quietly, "about some things." As they prepared to leave, Nascimento approached Anderson one final time. "I hope you kill them in America. Make Brazil proud." They shook hands genuinely this time. Anderson Silva made his UFC debut 2 months later, defeating Chris Lieben in 49 seconds. It began the most dominant title reign in middleweight history. Rodrigo Nascimento never spoke publicly about that night, but those who knew him said something changed. He became more focused on improvement rather than politics. Years later, after Anderson became a global superstar, he would think about that snow polo evening, not because it was his greatest victory, it wasn't even recorded, but because it taught him the difference between fighting to prove something and fighting to become something, the difference between defeating an opponent and defeating yourself. Anderson Silva's secret war wasn't fought in the UFC octagon in front of millions. It was fought on a humid evening in a small Brazilian dojo in front of 7 witnesses, against an opponent history would forget. But it was the victory that made all the others possible. Because sometimes, the most important fights are the ones nobody sees.